Friends, I have been working on Karnataka art, Indian art since mid 80s. As a student of art history, way back in 1986, I started my, you can say, early beginning of studies on Indian art, learning through the various concepts, various beliefs, cultural theories, especially on in connection with the Indian art, and also the study of the style and iconography and other related subjects. The present paper speaks about early art activities. Of course, this is part of my research work, which I have done even for my master's dissertation also. I did on pre-Chalukya art. This is the area which has received rather less attention by the scholars in general. So those who have studied the Karnataka or Indian temple architecture, Indian sculpture, the most of the books directly mention about only the Chalukyas of Badami. Though my native village is only about 10 kilometers away from Patadakal, my childhood memories goes very well with playing in the monuments of Patadakal as well as Mahakota, Aivale and Badami. And I did my matriculation in Badami only. So my relation with Chalukya monuments starting with my childhood, and of course, when looked at the Chalukya monument, always there was a question: how did all of a sudden such an interesting, important artworks appear amidst like an island in northern part of Karnataka? So there were no precedents in those days, and no serious studies were also made. And when we looked at in general, the development of art history in Karnataka, especially after 1948 in post-independence scenario, after the formation of linguistic states, I always call it as a linguistic state, which should not have been done, but it has been done in those days. But every linguistic state wanted to trace their roots and write their history, art history, and also create their own identity through their cultural milieu and cultural nuances and socio-cultural, political, economical. Mention anything, understand everything would be there. Like the way what happened to Indus Valley civilization or Indus Valley sites after the division of India and Pakistan. Almost in the same scenario, I always view. But when it comes to the study of the art historical factors, rather we should look at in a pan-Indian level than looking at the only to a regionalistic view. But sometimes, especially when we make the micro studies of developments, looking at the various regions, it is also necessary to concentrate on particular region to study about the origin and development and also how the influences, inspirations, beliefs, adaptations all fall part of the one orbit of the development. So first, let me congratulate with a small note to the Dr. Preeta and her entire team for organizing this very interesting seminar. I first of all congratulate them and thank them for inviting me and also providing a small space in between to speak about in the present day. So the syncretism, in fact, in 2015, I made a presentation in Goa. My friend Neeta Rathod also has joined in this August audience. So it was also a kind of a similar exercise which we did in 2015. But it is a kind of a re-look for myself to the material that is fit into this concept. See, when we look at the pan-Indian art, the pan-Indian art itself is completely a syncretic. It's not at all an isolated entity to say that it is only a particular faith or particular belief or particular concept. The overall Indian art is a multi-layered, multicultural, multi-stylistic, even in the context of whether it is a ritualistic practice or the religious practice, if we put it quote unquote religious practice, everything falls into the proper understanding of the syncretism. I think Indian syncretism is the cerebral belief of the Indian art or Indian, you can call it as an Indian concept in general. So the presentation here takes you to some interesting aspects of the early Karnataka or pre-Chalukyan art activities running through the Chalukyan art activities also. Some of the examples I have taken here in this presentation. There are only limited number of images I am having, 50 plus. Otherwise, it could have been a very enormous, elaborate presentation usually. To keep the time in mind. So let me go to the next slide. So as the archaeologists, historians know that the Karnataka region is very potential from the very earliest period, starting with the human habitation. Neolithic culture, very rich in Bhima, Krishna, Tungabhadra Valley, where systematic excavations have yielded plenty of results, not only results, but also the burial furnitures, which can be called scientifically studied with a C14 dating, etc. Similarly, megalithic culture was also very rich. When we read Professor Alchin connected with Muskie, he specifically mentioned how megalithic culture gradually transforms into a rich, culturally prevailed community or the cattle keepers community, whatever I mean the term we imply upon. But at least by 3rd century BCE, we know that the advent of the Maurya or the presence of the Maurya with as many as 9 minor rock edicts and 1 major slab edict. Major slab edict was found in Sannati. Sannati became the magnanimous site of the Buddhism as early as 3rd century BC. And there are, of course, thanks to Archaeological Survey of India producing a beautiful excavation report uh, in last decade. But my studies of Sannati goes back to 80s. Sannati, Chandralamba happened to be my family deity, and that was another reason I used to visit Sannati. But as a student of art history, when I first visited Sannati, definitely it had posed several challenges even before ASI took over the excavations at the center. So the stupa and the sculptures, what we noticed there, what has been discovered or what has been reported and also preserved by Archaeological Survey of India, definitely opens up a new art historical chapter to study the Karnataka art, not only Karnataka art in the peninsular India itself. They are not just a religious factor that works in Sannati Stupa. It is beyond the religious practices. We come across various castes, various creeds, various people from different walks of the life, donating, patronizing, and also practicing. So these are the some interesting factors which we will try to look into in this lecture. So the followed by Maurya, we have Satavahana. Almost all the rulers of Satavahana are found mentioned in various inscriptions found in Karnataka as well as Sannati especially. And the one very interesting small dynasty which I would refer to is the Chutu Satakarnis. Those who are well versed with the early history of Karnataka, these Chutu Satakarnis were the subordinates of the Satavahana and ruled from Banavasi, and then followed by the first Kannada speaking dynasty in the region of Karnataka was Kadambas. The Kadambas started to rule from early 4th century and ruled almost up to 6th century. Of course, their presence can be felt even up to 12th, 13th century CE. And then the Gangas from Mysore region, Talkad. And then the early Chalukyas as a most important ruling family before the Rashtrakutas. They were the one who controlled major portions of the Deccan as well as southern part of India. So with this note, uh, I have certain points to make it here. Rise of the political power leads to the religious and cultural establishment, resulted in a rich visual culture. Syncretism was an integral part of this development. Emergence, evolvements, and creation become trajectories of syncretic developments in visual depictions, which we are going to see through the presentation. See, these are the some megalithic dolmens which are even today seen very next to the Meguti Jain temple in Aivale. So the reason taking the dolmens as an example as a syncretic culture in this region is these are the earliest, you can say, the constructional activities in the form of the burials which started, which commenced, but also introduced a beautiful the burial furnitures like potteries, ironwares, etc. But apart from that, I have another thought that I always try to put forth. The arrival of Agastya from northern part of India to the south. There are more than a dozen places which have been associated with Agastya in Karnataka. Badami is one such place which is associated with Agastya myth. The pond in Badami is also known as Agastya Tirtha. So this is, you can call it as a very syncretism in pre-Christian era in our 5th 6th century. We don't know the exact date of Agastya. There were how many Agasthyas were there, that also I don't know, because in the entire southern part of India we come across more than 1,000. I just put a word, more than 1,000 times Agastya association is found in entire peninsular India. So probably this is also the period the texts like Puranas, Sthala Puranas also began to evolve and create their own pedagogical developments as a Guru Shishya Parampara through sculptural schools and also the visual depictions as a result of such practices. So let me just go back to the inscription, the slab edict which I mentioned. See, there are only two such examples in the entire history of Ashokan inscriptions, one at Sannati and another at Shahbazgiri, where we have the slab edict, the inscription carved on both the sides. It has to be erected, it has to be installed on a pedestal where one can go around and read the inscription like looking at the round sculpture, looking at the three-dimensional sculpture. So nowadays, three-dimensional word is very popular with sculpture and photography. Everything becomes 3D. So what is the importance of this particular phase is the texts like Mahavamsha, the Sri Lankan chronicle, like Mahavamsha, informs us with the emergence of the missionaries that have visited the northern part of Karnataka, especially Banavasi and Mahisha Mandala. That is Mysore, Bangalore region. The Kaveri basin can be identified as the Mahisha Mandala. So the early conversions takes place in Banavasi. It is said that nearly 80,000 people were converted, and all the people, all the converted Buddhist, the entire stock went to Sri Lanka to attend the inauguration of the stupa at Anuradhapura, installed by Dattagamini. Anyway, I have my own doubt about all those things, but one thing very clear, like a Theravada was a very strong, and this is even before the emergence of the Vedic cults in the region. Vedic cults in the region. I am very clearly mentioning even before the emergence of the Vedic cults or Vedic practices in the region of the northern part of Karnataka. There might be, we don't know, and when unless until we have the sufficient number of evidence, we won't be able to say idam that there were also coexistence. The way we give examples of the early Brahmanical sculptures from Kushana or even Shatavahana period as parallel to those of Mathura Gandhara school. But the plenty of literature mentioning about the presence of the Vedic community, Vedic cult, Vedic divinities, of course, they have been referred later part of the art practice in this region. So the Gavimat inscription of Ashoka, Koppal, this is a minor rock edict. And Ashoka's sculpture. Ashoka's sculpture, it was in a big news in last decade, where the first ever inscribed, the portrait of, royal portrait of Ashoka was found in Sanati excavation. So this also adds to the personal, probably personal presence of Ashoka and also propagating the faith of Buddhism in the region. So the stupa, the scholars, some of the well-known Buddhist scholars speak about the art in association with the Hinayana and Mahayana, where they, implicitly believe that Hinayana doesn't have the representation of Buddha, only with Mahayana it started. But I feel somewhere we are misguided with those theories, and the practice of representation of the image of Buddha, Dr. Kumaraswamy has beautifully narrated how the image, the concept of Shakyamuni has taken place. So the Upanishadic or Vedic practices gradually, being adopted into the Buddhist mainstreams, they have been completely part of the practice. So the presence of iconographical traits like a symbolical representations, like a metaphorical understandings of the early, iconic representations of Buddha are to be seen in the form of Dharma Chakra or the Prathamopanyasa or the first sermon or even Mahaparinirvana. Mahaparinirvana represented with empty throne. So the belief in one hand, when transforming the belief into the visual culture or visual representation, there is a very interesting development what we can notice. The formal development supported by the beliefs and textual references. So the full image of Ashoka, I quickly take you to a couple of images of the birth of Buddha. Birth of Buddha, like Maya Devi, reclining Maya Devi, dream of Maya Devi with a white elephant. The elephant is very tiny image shown here. You can see my cursor. And the interpretation of dream and arrival of symbolic Buddha. So the both are same, but the mode of representation, the episodes, like that is how the syncretism play in various modes of representation, bringing the imagery as a predominant form here. Like a Mara Vijaya panel, Mara is again associated with Indra, supposed to be the Indra, and then the Mahaparinirvana, only the empty throne with the headdress along with Dharma Chakra is represented here. So this is again another early form of the birth narration. But what is interesting here is you can notice birth narration represented the Yaksha cult, which was probably, like a nature spirit. And the Henry Zimmer speaks beautifully about the Yaksha cult. And of course, Anand Kumaraswamy also written his major work is on Yaksha of Indian art or Indian culture, Indian understanding. So the moment the child, symbolic child, is presented as a part of customary of Shakya clan to the Vraksha Chaitya, Yaksha Shakyavardhana appears directly from the platform of the tree and gives his obeisance. So it is a reversal. Usually, every newborn represented to the tree, presented to the Vraksha Chaitya, but whereas here it is a reversal. The personification, the personification of Yaksha in human form, emerging out of the platform and bowing down to the symbolic Buddha. See here, Drishya and Adrishya, both concepts are there. Both concepts are there. You can understand how the cultic practices became part of the mainstream practices with the Buddhist pantheon. So then Avinishkramana, the living of the palace, and you can notice the horse is being carried by the yakshas in their palm. So it is, the symbol, the sense of presence of artist is so interesting. We know that Buddha left home, the palace in the midnight. So just imagine the complete, the city was in a silent. When if Buddha moves on his horse, favorite horse, Chandaka, definitely there would be sound of the horse. So symbolically, not to create the noise or not to create the sound, the artist has created this sort of representation in the narration. Naga cult was also part of the Buddhist pantheon. Naga Muchalinda, serpent worship. I mean, I don't know. I mean, all the senior scholars may remember Bharat Iyer's study on the Naga cult of the South India in as early as early 50s. So the Naga Muchalinda, Naga play a very important role in the Buddhist pantheon. So the Naga Muchalinda, Nagas have the share of his relics, one share of Buddha's relics after his demise. So Ramagrama concept is directly connected with Naga cult and Naga practices. So Nagamuchalinda become the symbolic representation of Buddha here. It's not just the symbolic representation of Naga alone, but the symbolic representation of Buddha through the Naga cult or the Naga Muchalinda. So the repetition of the slide here. And amidst all the Buddhist practices, Buddhist beliefs, we have many emerging cults, many emerging practices that were prevalent in the pre-Christian era. So the disc stones, the only one has been discovered, the present one was discovered in Sanati by the state archaeologists, but there are plenty of such examples found in northern part of India. If we carefully look at the presentation of Mother Goddess in the center, supported by flanked by animals all around, you can also associate the feminine version of the Pashupati. Feminine version of Pashupati are directly associated with the fertility cult. Directly associate with the fertility cult. So the same cult, when it was much refined, rather in the mode of in the representation of the Lajja Gauri. So the Lajja Gauri name was given in the mid 50s, but what should be called, like Stella Kramrisch calls it as a Aditi Uttanapada, and H.D. Sankalia, of course, wrote a lengthy essay on Lajja Gauri. An American scholar wrote complete book on Lajja Gauri cult, Professor Carol Bolon. But the local versions of the fertility worship, see, when we look at the Indian art, that's what I was very particular in mentioning pan-Indian art, pan-Indian beliefs. So pan-Indian beliefs appear in macro level in regionalistic practices, regionalistic views. So the goddess Lajja, or the woman in birth-giving posture without the head portion represented in human form. But interestingly, many examples found in the Buddhist sites have this stupa type of symbolism on the representation on the top, along with the kumbha form of the body, kumbha form of the belly, along with the lotus. So this one has the lotus. It is completely worn out. You can notice it. So the same cult became a cultic practice during the Badami Chalukya, resulting in a temple dedicated to Lajja Gauri in Naganathakolla, and the sculpture which is now preserved in Badami Museum. So these are the small terracotta images, tiny figures, Nagarika types. I'm just trying to put it in a more open manner. Yeah, you can look, they are only 4.5 centimeters. They are made out of red clay as well as the white clay, that is kaolin. So Chutu Satakarni is also important from the point of understanding the development. Like the kings were followers of the Buddhist faith, but look at the name. Vinnu Kada Satakarni, Vishnu Skanda Satakarni. In the morning, Shiv Shankar Babu raised the question about the Skanda cult. I have a wonderful answer for you, sir. In passing references, I will refer to various concept of Skanda also. His daughter name was Shivaskanda Nagashri. Shivaskanda. Her father name is added Vishnu Skanda Satakarni. See the syncretism of the name itself. Shivaskanda Nagashri. Naga is also there. Shri is also there. Shri Naga and Shri is also there. And she installed Naga Pratima engraved with the inscription all around the rib. And it is also mentioned she built Vihara, excavated Tataka, a pond, and installed Naga Pratima. And the most interesting part is the inscription gives us the pedagogy of the artist. The artist was Nataka, and he was a disciple of Damoraka, who was teacher in Sanjayanti. Sanjayanti is nothing but Banavasi. So here is the example, and this image was discovered by me in early 90s in Banavasi only. So this is comparable with the Sanati example, which you have seen earlier. So this the custom of installing the Naga Pratima, today also we do it. Today also we do it. We associate Muruga with the Naga, and also the install the Naga images for the fertility purposes. So the same concept, whether it was there in those days or not, I mean, that has to be checked once again. And these are the images connected with Banavasi excavation, Banavasi, Hariti and child. Hariti becomes a most important deity in the Buddhist pantheon, and also important in Banavasi Kadamba as well as the Chalukyas of Badami. These are the heads. The green head was carved by an artist called Ravi, who was a disciple of Gosala. Probably see the hairdress aesthetically. I mean, if you carefully observe her hairdress, the Chaitya motif appears, and also along with the lotus, as if the lotus open, completely blown lotus tucked into a kind of the jewelry having the Chaitya motif, and she is wearing it on her bun of the hair. So these are some of the examples from Vadagaon Madhavpur. Those who are well versed with the early archaeology of Karnataka, Vadagaon Madhavpur is the first site where we come across references to the Vedic practices. The Stamba, which was discovered in Vadagaon Madhavpur inscription, refers to the Vajapeya and other Vedic practices, Vedic rituals practiced by the possibly people who were there. So these were the two antiques, the objects found in the Vadagaon Madhavpur excavation. Thanks to Professor Sundara and his team in 70s, they excavated it. And these are the things again from Vadagaon Madhavpur. The zodiac symbols are represented, and animated the animals, like especially the bull and the lions are represented there. See, the beauty is, look at the technical part. These are this is only 4 mm thin. The 4 mm thin, the body of this the potsherd is only 4 mm, and it is made out of mold. It is not hand casted. It is only it is taken impression from the mold. So the cultic interpolations like a Yaksha cult as part of the Buddhist mainstream, terracotta Yaksha, which was discovered in 1997. I was there when it was taken out from the foundation excavation to house. Thank God the person who discovered it was a teacher in Banavasi. He handed it over to the local museum. So now it is displayed in local museum, and the Yaksha protector from Gudnapur, M.N. Deshpande, Professor M.N. Dr. M.N. the well-known archaeologist, has beautifully, put the Yaksha protectors of the India with Pitalkor excavation. So Gudnapur Yaksha was probably Shankara. That's what Dr. Sundara also identified. So now we come to the major change in the development. So the Banavasi Kadamba, the material what I have shown is purely a Buddhist in nature, purely a Buddhist in affiliation, but around 320 the Kadamba dynasty was established in Banavasi. Mayura Sharma was the first king, he becomes Varma. See here itself how the Purusha Sukta becomes a very important. Brahmana, see the many people analyze Purusha Sukta according to the whims and fancies. Nowadays, it has become one of the very important discourse in Karnataka with many so-called intellectuals and thinkers. Brahmano Mukhamasit Bahu Rajanya Kritaha. So they think that they interpret it in such a horrible manner. The Brahmins were born out of the mouth, face, and the Kshatriyas born out of the shoulders. So the when we try to understand Purusha Sukta in connection with the ancient beliefs and things, Mayura Sharma, when he becomes king, he becomes Varma. He changes his name. The Talagunda inscription, Talagunda, this is the place Talagunda Sthana Kundura. Sthana Kundura, it was the second capital of Banavasi kings. So he categorically mentioned about why he become Raja. So the hand which used to hold grass, now holding the sword. See how beautiful it is mentioned. The hand which used to hold kusha, that is darba, now it is holding the sword. That means the act is only changed, but act is same at the same time. So the interesting factor about the period is, in the morning we were talking about the religious tolerance, religious beliefs, etc. But I am little contradicting here that particular point. I try to look entire development from the early Mauryan period to the Kadamba period here in the northern part of Karnataka. If you had observed my presentation, if you had observed my sculptures, majority of the sculptures were carved in the marble stone like limestone. It is a creamy complexion stone, which was used exclusively for all Buddhist sculpture. But I strongly feel there was some kind of a religious intolerance or a kind of a distinction they wanted to create at this point in the early 4th century by rejecting the stone and adopting the local material. So which can be seen very clearly in the time of the Kadambas of Banavasi as well as the Gangas of Talkadu also. So this is Talagunda pillar inscription, which refers to the installation of the Pranaveshwara Linga, one of the early examples of Shivalinga, and it refers the Pranaveshwara Linga was worshipped by Satakarni kings. It means Shatavahana kings. So now they are worshipping it. Here is an inscription, and you can notice the door jamb. The temple must have been altered later on, but Shivalinga appears to be one of the early examples of the Shivalinga. So with the introduction of Shivalinga, one can notice there is also a change. There is also a shift in the religious beliefs. So it is not a kind of a layer on the Buddhism or a rejection of the Buddhism completely, but definitely there was a rejection of the concepts. Definitely there was a rejection of a concept, but amidst this, we have couple of examples of Buddhism still being worshipped, practiced by the subordinates of the Kadambas. Okay, this is Gudnapura Lake. Gudnapura, known for the pillar inscription, Ravi Varma, and the brick structure there directly refers to the Vasantotsava and Rangamantapa. Vasantotsava, many earlier scholars have studied the inscription. Some of them have read it as a Kama Jinalaya, and whether it is associated with the Jaina pantheon, but there are some Jaina images of 8th, 9th century in the structure what you notice here. But anyway, apart from that, I wanted you to see this slide because how the beliefs and practices keep changing from time to time. So the earliest image of Ganesha in Gokarna, Dvibahu Ganesha. Dvibahu Ganesha, see the stone, it's a green cyst. And the image has early iconographical features. If you carefully observe the not only iconography, the modeling of the image, it is almost 4 feet image installed on a pedestal, worshipped from at least from 300 CE, at least worshipped from 325 CE, and you can just count more than 1700 years. The image is being given bath and being worshipped, and you can notice the Dvibahu with the Modaka Patra, which is like a chalice, which is like a long elongated the pot. And here, instead of Danta, he holds a radish in the hand, muli in the hand. So the Ardhodaka, the dress, and Ganta Yadnopavita, all these forms are also noticeable in the early iconographical features of the Ganesha. So there is a lotus on the head, Padma Shirsha. Padma Shirsha, again, which is associated with the Samyak Jnan of the divinity, and trying to establish the Ganesha as one of the predominant deities with all such iconographical details. So Harihara image, this is one of the probably earliest Harihara in entire peninsular India. I don't know about Andhra Pradesh, Professor K.K. Chaudhary can enlighten us. But in Tamil Nadu, I have not come across any images, neither in Kerala. And this was also discovered in Gokarna, and the image can be compared with the Konkan Maurya image, which is now preserved in Prince of Wales Museum or Chhatrapati Shivaji Museum, Mumbai. So this is one of the earliest representation. You can look at the chaste body details with all iconographical traits. See, the Vedic Rudra doesn't hold trident. Even Shatapatha Brahmana doesn't mention that he holds, a trident. A trident is a later interpolation as the attribute into Shiva imagery. But he can hold danda or an arrow along with bow. So probably danda is represented here than that of the trident, Trishula. And you can see the conch. Unfortunately, both the arms are broken. Probably he held Shankha in the lower hand and the chakra on the upper left. So the tiger face is also represented. Even Dattura is also represented along with the waist belt. See the bodily details, how sensitively tried to model the body, like it was compared to Gupta images. But if you now, one has to give thought about the regional schools, like what really Gupta school or Gupta mainstream was made. It is contribution of the local schools developed into mainstream of the Gupta art. So the very distinctly early iconographical features are also adopted with the third eye and Jata Mukuta and Kirita Mukuta, which is a shorter. So coming to, in continuation with that, Dr. Preeta, please prompt me. Otherwise, I will be going on. You can stop me in between wherever I supposed to stop.
No problem, sir. You can take 10 or 15 minutes more.
Yeah, I shall take around 15 minutes. I'll wind it up quickly. Okay. In the morning, there was a very interesting discussion of Harihara. Okay. And the Harihara image associated with the Vrashava Kunjara and symbolic representation of elephant with Lakshmi Narayana, as well as Nandi with the Shiva Parvati. But the interesting fact is, this is the first ever example in the entire Indian art where consorts of Shiva and Vishnu are represented along with. And this is the best representation is, please look at the vehicles. They are in zoanthropomorphic forms. Their heads categorically represented in their zoomorphic faces. Their animal faces like Nandi with a bull face, Garuda with a human face partially with a projected nose. But look the way how they are standing, how they are posed. You know, See, no iconographic texts. I always contradict this view of the textual influence, but text only give prescription about the iconography, not about the mode of representation. Mode of representation always is the right of the artist who composes it and who visualizes it, who represents it. So that is the beauty of the Indian art, not only Chalukya, but wherever we go, the mode of representation changes from place to place, but the uniqueness comes only when new forms were integrated, evolved, and represented. That's how the early Harihara, starting with a single image of Harihara with the images of like Parvati and Lakshmi appearing together in between vehicles. Look the way they are standing. They are made as if the children are standing in between parents. That is how they are represented. They are become part of the group. You never feel that they are treated like a vehicles. They are more than vehicles. As part of the family, they are treated here. And this is only example of cave number 3 Harihara, the change mode of representation. And of course, the another one from Ramanfadi cave, and Harihara from Durga temple. So I just take 2-3 examples of Harihara and get into some other discussion. But the interesting fact is the Ayudha Purushas are added here. Usually for a Vaishnava images, we come across Ayudha Purusha. So to compose, balance the image, the artist has used the arm. Unfortunately, all the arms are broken, but you can notice that the flying figures on the top, they are virtually look like Ayudha Purushas. The Garuda here and Kaumodaki here, but the predominance of the attributes goes to Vishnu. But Hara side, categorically, you can see the Jata Mukuta along with those weapons which are missing here. So the most fascinating image, I always try to show it from Pattadakal, Virupaksha temple. Look at the standing posture. And Garuda is also represented, Nandi is also represented, but he is in a very rhythmic standing posture like Dvibhanga. And artist is very true to the iconography. Again, he brings in Chakra as well as Shankha together. Look at the design of the Trishula. And there is no Kirita Mukuta here. It is only Jata Mukuta. It is only Jata Mukuta, but he also tried to put the weapons attributes along with. So Ardhanari also of the same period. Ardhanari yesterday in an opening talk, Ardhanari concept was spoken, like Brungi as a representation. Probably early Ardhanari images, we have to look only at Elephanta, followed by cave number 26, Dhuma, the cave number 29, Yellora, followed by cave number 1, Badami. So the varieties of the Ardhanari also to be seen in Badami Chalukya. It's not just one typology, the mode of representation and beliefs like Simha Vahini, and Simha has been introduced in Ramanfadi cave. So the most fascinating Ardhanari, I think, in the entire history of Badami Chalukya is from Mahakuta, Virupaksha temple. Look at the image and also the mirror in the right hand, and also she holds the Nari side holds the earlobe. So the artist trying to understand the feminine and male version very systematically and try to blend them in such a manner that the aesthetically the image look very great. So now I go back to the Kadamba period. Some of the cults practices. In the morning, Professor K.K. Chaudhary was mentioning about Yadava Panchaviras from Andhra Pradesh. Early Vrashnivira sculptures were also found in Banavasi region. So the image has been identified as the Vasudeva or Krishna. It was found in a place called Kontapala on the coastal Karnataka. It's near Bhatkal. This is one of the early images definitely identified with the Vrashnivira cult. So, and then Skanda. The Skanda image was discovered in Banavasi excavation. The Skanda I would like to refer to you now. The reference of Mahasena Hariti are already there in the inscriptions of the Banavasi Kadambas as well as the Chalukyas of Badami. They tell Hariti Putranam, Manavya Gotranam, Hariti Putranam, Mahasena as a representation of their head of the army. So the inscription itself clearly refer, even Gatha Saptashati categorically mention about various divinities which we referring as a part of the syncretic practices in the peninsular India today. So in Southeast Asia and Southeast and Central Asia as well as India in general. So the Shakta or the Durga Mahisha, the Mahisha Mardini, there is, I don't call Durga because unless until the lion motif is not there, we cannot call the, we cannot call goddess as Durga. So Mahisha Mardini, early images of the Mahisha Mardini, one from Devi Hall, it is in Haveri district of Karnataka. The center one is from Talagunda, which is in KRI Museum. And this is the third one is from Jambehalli, very near to Sirsi. It is in situ. It is being worshipped today also. Look at the mode of representation and the mode of representation holding of the tail of the Mahisha. So identical, but the same mode, same typology also changes when we move on into the Badami Chalukya. Another important cult developed during Kadamba period is Narasimha. I have published 2-3 papers on Narasimha cult so far, and a small complete book on early Kadamba sculpture published by Karnataka State Lalkala Academy, which is in Kannada. More than 24 Kevala Narasimha images are identified to the pre-Chalukyan period. In the morning, Shivshankar Babu was also questioning me about Kevala, Girija and all these aspects in the syncretic group. So the early forms of the Narasimha were definitely not in the Ugra form. They were all in benign form. So you can say that the first images were created as the mission complete image. I can say mission complete image. It means the Prahlada Charita, the appearance of Narasimha as a complete incarnation or manifestation, avatara, appearing from the pillar and also vanquishing Hiranyakashipu. So then he becomes completely a Shantamurti, the bestowing. There are many compositions regarding the Narasimha, like Prahlada Krita Narasimha Stotra, Shankara Krita Narasimha Stotra, and Madhva Krita Narasimha Stotra. There are plenty of such eulogizing Narasimha as a most important auspicious deity. But the beauty is zoomorphic and zoanthropomorphic figures. They developed as a cultic practices in the coastal and Malnad region of Karnataka. So even in northern part of Karnataka also. The typology continues even up to Vijayanagara and even post Vijayanagara period also. So the forms and motifs, they become so strong that they continue to form, continue to inspire the succeeding periods also. So you can notice the typologies, various typologies of Kevala Narasimha. This is terracotta image, which was discovered by me in 95, and now it is a registered antiquity with me. And this is from Kubturu in Shimoga district, Kuppugadde and Siddhara. So you can notice how the changing images of representation of Narasimha also near Banavasi, this one from Basruru, and this was in Mahakuta. This was in Mahakuta. See, Chalukya art is not all of a sudden it began to emerge as a independent identity. It developed inheriting stylistic, iconographic, religious, syncretic nuances that were already established in the pre-Chalukyan era. So this is the image, the Narasimha image. You can see my cursor here, was there in Mahakuta, but unfortunately it is missing from Mahakuta now. I don't know whether it has been kept in Badami Museum, but even it is not seen in Badami Museum also. So the Badami examples of Ganesha as a later representations, Mahisha Mardini and Narasimha. Narasimha, Kevala Narasimha concept continues even in Badami Chalukya period with the lotus. You can notice the lotus. This is one of the early examples of Ugra form. But cave number 3, Badami, has a Ugra form of the Narsimha. Probably 578 was the first example of the Ugra form of Narsimha representing in Badami. And Mahishamardini converting into Durga Mahishamardini. See, introduction of the composition of the lion along with the combating deity, the victorious deity. I don't call combating, victorious deity. So the Ravanpadi as well as Durga temple. And the Durga temple, Narasimha is here. So there are so many things which I can go on, but restricting myself to the time, I say thank you to all of you for listening me patiently. I think I have done my duty introducing you the aesthetic part as well as the artistic and also religious part of the syncretism in my part of the region. Thank you very much.